on, Headliner Nation? Your boy Kyle back with the fantasy headliners. It's time for week 5, start and sit for the wide receiver position. Week 4 was all sorts of crazy, right? Didn't matter where you turn. There was news about COVID, injuries, everything like that. And we just had a crazy week. So hopefully week 5 is a little bit more subtle. All right. Week 5, 2020, calm yourself down. All right. Knock it off. I already had to talk to you over the phone once. Don't make me give you a call back. All right, let's get back to having some normalcy in fantasy football in week 5. Let's toss up our week 4 accuracy like we do every single week. Last week, a really good week. 76% accuracy last week for the wide receiver position. Absolutely love it. My guys last week, Devontae Parker, my Manscaped must start. He ended up hitting last week. CeeDee Lamb was a hit. Traquan Smith was a hit. Scotty Miller was a hit. Man, Tim Patrick, I was so close to starting Tim Patrick too. Really bummed about that. And Jamison Crowder, I had him listed as a start because it was Thursday night. Seemed doubtful really heading into the game. Didn't really think he was going to do a whole lot anyway. And boy, did he ball out. So good for him. Glad to see him back and healthy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and move into it. And our first matchup will be Thursday Night Football. All right, Tampa Bay and Chicago, and it seems like all the wide receivers in Tampa Bay are banged up right now. So it's a short week, and it will be interesting to see how they turn it around. As of right now, none of them practiced, okay? As of Tuesday morning, nobody had practiced this week. We'll see if they start ramping it back up on Wednesday. We'll have to keep an eye on the injury report. Evans is going to be a start for me. If he is healthy, we are going to play Mike Evans. All right. Scotty Miller is also going to be a start for me as well. Now, keep in mind, Buster Skrine, the guy who typically plays in the slot for the Chicago Bears, has allowed the 4th most receiving yards to wide receivers in the slot this year. So, Scotty Miller coming off a big week last week will be in a prime position to have another big week as long as he's healthy. Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed both of those guys are healthy. Allen Robinson's a start. We're not going to be sitting him anytime soon. Maybe set the bar a little bit lower just this week just because Tampa Bay has been so good. And I really wanted to start Anthony Miller this week because, again, the Tampa Bay Bucks controlling guys out of the slot, it's really, really difficult. But him and Mooney are both splitting a lot of snaps right now. Miller's not really working unless he's working on 3 wide receiver sets. So I just don't really trust either of them this week. The defense is pretty good. I think they're both going to kind of get shut down this week, and Allen Robinson's going to have to be that main guy to pick up the slack. For the Rams in Washington, Woods and Kupp are both going to be starts for me this week, but limit some of those expectations that we typically have for those guys. Maybe they're going to be more like wide receiver 2s this week than wide receiver 1s because the Washington football team has allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Jefferson and Reynolds will both be sits for me, but Woods and Kupp, it's really hard to sit either of them this week. I got a couple of teams on buys. We got the Titans coming back from the COVID issues as well, and we're going to have 4 teams this week coming in on short weeks because of 2 games on Monday Night Football. So for this week, Woods and Kupps will both be start for me, even though, again, Washington has done pretty good about limiting wide receivers. With these 2 guys, maybe just bring that bar down a little bit for them as well this week. For Terry McLaurin for the Washington football team, we're not setting him. I don't care that he's going up against Jalen Ramsey. McLaurin has 387 yards this year, 5th in the National Football League, and he's played against some pretty darn good cornerbacks so far. Terry McLaurin, he's becoming a must start for me every single week, a guy that we're always going to have in our lineup. And again, this week, even though he's got Jalen Ramsey, and also, keep in mind, Jalen Ramsey might be suspended this week after that brush up with Golden Tate after the game the other day. Who knows? Maybe Jalen Ramsey doesn't even see the field this week. But even if he does, Terry McLaurin's still in a position to put up some good yards because he's been doing it all season long. Inman and then Isaiah Wright, who stepped in for Steven Sims. And even Steven Sims, if he ends up being healthy, all those guys will be sits for me. The undefeated Buffalo Bills. That's right, Buffalo Mafia. Go ahead and rejoice. Your Bills are undefeated. They're looking good so far. Diggs and Brown and Beasley, all 3 of them, they're going to be starts for me this week going up against the Tennessee Titans. Why is that? Well, because Tennessee, at best, will be getting into the practice facility for the first time on Wednesday. So they're going to have a short week as it is already, and they haven't really done anything. I mean, when teams have bye weeks, typically they still are out there practicing and doing those things. Tennessee hasn't even been doing that. So even though last week was a bye for them, they weren't able to get out on the field and do anything. So they're going to be coming into this game a little slow, possibly. They're going to have to get into it. So I'm going to start all three of those guys. For Gabriel Davis, I'm going to sit him just because his value every single week is really built on touchdowns. Like, he's got to score a touchdown. Now, if John Brown, if an injury were to pop up or anything like that and he were to be limited, then Gabriel Davis, we're going to start getting him back into that start conversation. But for now, he's going to be a sit for me. On the other side, for Tennessee, again, because they're coming off this short week, they haven't played, they haven't practiced, they haven't really done anything except watch film over video. I'm going to go ahead and sit Corey Davis, and if he plays this week, A.J. Brown. So I'm going to sit both of those guys, but keep an eye on Adam Humphries. If Adam Humphries plays this week, and again, if he plays, he was one of the ones that tested positive for COVID. I'm not necessarily sure he's actually going to be able to play this week, but if he does, he will be a start for me, because Buffalo, they are allowing the most yards out of the slot of any team in the NFL this year. So Adam Humphries and potentially Jonnu Smith, who we'll talk about on the tight end video, could be in good matchups this week. For Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, everybody's a sit for me, unless your name is Zach Ertz. But again, that's a different video. I just can't trust anybody right now. They're all banged up. There's a lot of guys that are on and off the field. The offensive line looks bad. Carson Wentz hasn't been that great this year, probably because of the lack of weapons and the offensive lines. But whatever it may be, I'm not really willing to start any of these wide receivers going up against a tough Pittsburgh defense, even though they are also coming off a week where they had to wait out, but they were not kept from practicing. They did not have any COVID issues. So they just couldn't play, but they'll be ready to go. Juju's going to be a start for me, and Deontay Johnson's going to be a start for me. Both of those guys see more than enough targets that they can score and score easily. A couple weeks ago, Deontay Johnson, the only reason that he didn't really hit his mark is, again, because he went out with that concussion. So if you still got a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth from Deontay Johnson putting up like 1 point for you 2 weeks ago, keep in mind it was because he left the game early with a concussion. It wasn't necessarily his performance. Claypool and James Washington will be sits for me. The Arizona Cardinals and the New York Jets. DeAndre Hopkins, yes, you own him. He is in your lineup. But we've kind of been shuffling back and forth on some of the other wide receivers this season. It was thought Larry Fitzgerald would be the number 2 to enter the season. Some people thought it'd be Christian Kirk. Andy Isabella came out of nowhere a couple of weeks ago and had a good game. And then Andy Isabella didn't do anything last week because Christian Kirk was back and Christian Kirk had a decent game. So who's the wide receiver 2 there? I don't know. I'm not really willing to guess, though. If you really want to try and play one of the wide receivers outside of DeAndre Hopkins, I'm going to have to let you take the fall for that one, because I'm going to be skipping on them for right now until someone really establishes themselves as being that set in stone wide receiver 2. For the New York Jets, Jamison Crowder is going to be a start. Why? Because the dude sees so much volume, you can't put him on your bench. In a PPR league, especially wide receiver 3 flex position, he should be out there every single week. Jamison Crowder is getting so many targets. The volume is there. The production was even there last week. We're going to keep playing him. But for the rest of the guys on that team, the rest of them will be sits, because it may end up being one or the other. This matchup going up against Arizona, pretty tough defense, even though they didn't really show it last week. Still a tough defense. Who's going to be starting at quarterback? All of those things. So Crowder, still going to be a guy that I'll start, because in half PPR, because of all the volume he gets, he can easily get to that 10-point threshold that we need to be a start. For Las Vegas and Kansas City, I've only got one Las Vegas wide receiver as a start this week, and it might surprise you. It's Nelson Aguilar. I have a feeling that Nelson Aguilar is going to find pay dirt this week, and it only really takes one big play, for him to hit that 10-point threshold. I think it may end up being him this week. I'm going to go with him to score a touchdown this week against Kansas City, because we all know more than likely Las Vegas is going to have to chuck the ball a little bit, and that's going to lead to some more volume for Nelson Aguilar on that deep ball. For Kansas City, Hill's going to be a start like always, but again, it's tough to predict whoever is going to be that wide receiver too. I mean, Mecole Hardman scored this past week, but he had like 3 receptions and 28 yards, so he wasn't even that like deep play threat that where he normally scores his touchdowns. That's where he's getting it from. Sammy Watkins had the big week one. He hasn't done anything then. Demarcus Robinson hasn't done anything other than drop a couple of passes or a couple touchdown passes in week 1. So for me, yes, you rely on Hill every single week. No, you don't risk it with the other guys. Jacksonville and Houston, Bill O'Brien, he's gone. So what are we going to see from the Houston Texans this week? Not 100% sure, but They're probably going to have to throw the ball quite a bit this week going up against Jacksonville. DJ Chark's going to be a start for me. Huge week last week coming back from that injury. Glad that you were able to get him into your lineup if you did. And then Chenault's going to be a start for me as well. Chenault, I just like him. I like the targets that he's been getting over the last couple of games. And I think that's going to help translate in this game going up against Houston. Houston might be able to bring a little bit of pressure, with like J.J. Watt up front, get to Gardner Minshew a little bit, make him move around. With Chenault, if they're running him in some of those short to intermediate routes, he might be the guy that they're targeting a little bit quicker in the passing game than a guy like Keelan Cole. If Keelan Cole was running those routes, then I might start him over Chenault this week. But Cole, a little bit more of a deep threat. So I'm going to set him just because I don't know how much time Minshew may end up having this week. Chenault might be the guy that really sees a decent amount of volume. It's kind of that emergency guy to Gardner Minshew if he starts getting in trouble. For the Houston Texans, Will Fuller will be a start. If he's healthy, we start him. He sees way too much volume. His upside is way too high every single week. But no one's really doing anything outside of that. Cooks hasn't done anything this year. Stills, yeah, he has a touchdown, but volume-wise, he's not doing anything. Randall Cobb had a good week a couple of weeks ago, didn't do anything last week. So again, we've got a lot of really good guys that are like wide receiver ones, but we've got some teams that it's really hard to predict every single week who that wide receiver 2 is going to be, and that's where we're kind of getting into trouble with some of these guys. So for right now, until we see somebody maybe start to establish themselves over the next couple of weeks, we just got to be careful and pick and choose where some of these matchups might be a little bit better. Cincinnati at Baltimore, and it might surprise you, but I'm going to go ahead and start Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins this week, going up against a tough Baltimore defense. Why? Well, they've just been getting so many looks, and the Cincinnati Bengals have decided to throw the ball 900 times a game. Last week, we saw them finally involve Joe Mixon in the passing game and really commit to the run. Yeah, it was going up against Jacksonville, but, it doesn't matter. This is going to be a tougher matchup this week, but maybe, I don't want to get my hopes up. Okay, maybe we see the tides turn a little bit where Joe Mixon gets a little bit more involved in the passing game. So we just want to continue to monitor that. 6 targets, 6 receptions last week for him, but T. Higgins has really stepped up as being that wide receiver too over A.J. Green. Tyler Boyd is the wide receiver 1 there right now, and T. Higgins the last couple of weeks has looked really, really good. So I'm fine running both of those guys out there this week. While with the Ravens, Marquise Brown is going to be a start. Absolutely love Marquise Brown this week, and a lot of people are down on him right now, but still had a pretty big game last week, and he was literally inches away from scoring. He was taken down just past the 1-yard line, couldn't quite get into the end zone. If he had, then he's got a lot more points from last week. Don't give up on Marquise Brown yet at this point. Cincinnati's defense is not that great. They've looked okay at times, but not that great. Marquise Brown definitely can beat everybody for a big game here and there, so I'm going to continue to start him. Don't be down on him. Big games are coming ahead of him, all right? Even though the touchdowns haven't been there yet, they will come sooner or later. For the rest of the Ravens offense, though, for those wide receivers, we're going to skip on them this week. Carolina and Atlanta, and is this the week that DJ Moore gets back on track? We'll have to wait and see. Robbie Anderson definitely has a primo spot to smash this week with some big plays. But Robbie Anderson has turned into more than just a deep threat. He's a guy that's really running a lot of intermediate and deep routes now and is showing that he can get in and out of those routes really smoothly. So I really like what they've done with him there and utilized him, even though it's cost DJ Moore a little bit of his value. But going up against a team that allows the 4th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, I think you got to roll with DJ Moore again this week, even if you're feeling a little iffy about it. Go ahead and roll with him and Robbie Anderson this week. We're not going to go with Curtis Samuel, though. We'll leave Curtis Samuel on the bench. With Atlanta, yes, last week going up against Green Bay was awful. All right, Calvin Ridley, really 1 catch is all we needed from him for some of you to win your leagues, and he didn't do anything, okay? So for this week, we are going to go back to Gage, Ridley, and Jones. But we are going to monitor it, all right? This Carolina defense is playing a lot better than I think anybody anticipated, including myself. But we have to see whether or not Matt Ryan can get it going again. This was a team that was throwing the ball quite a bit and doing pretty well to start the season. But over the last couple of weeks, they're not looking like themselves. Really not sure what it is at this point with the Falcons, but I'm going to give them another week. If they really can't get it together this week, then Russell Gage is going to go back to being a sit for me. And then we'll have to continue to monitor Ridley and Jones on a weekly basis, even though both of those guys will probably be starts every single week. Tougher matchups, we might have to decide to sit one of them. But for now, we're going to start all three of them this week because, let's face it, more than likely they're going to have to throw the ball a ton. When that happens, the volume's going to go towards those wide receivers, and they'll be in a great position this week. Miami at San Francisco, and Devontae Parker, he does scare us every single week. It seems like every week he's leaving the field at some point in time with an injury, and then all of a sudden the dude is back, and he ends up doing just fine. So we're going to go ahead and list him as the sole start for the Miami Dolphins this week. And only one other wide receiver to start on the other side, and that's going to be Deebo Samuel. Deebo looked pretty good last week. I think this week they start to get him rolling a little bit more. Brandon Ayuk is a guy that I would like to start, but what are they going to do with him? Last week had that rushing touchdown of 38 yards. That really is what made him a start last week. If he hadn't had that, it would have been a pretty bad day for him. So let's see how they get Brandon Ayuk involved with Deebo Samuel being back on the field. After I see a little bit of gameplay with both of them together and how they're going to utilize them, we might be able to start both of them. But for Deebo, because he's basically the preemptive wide receiver one there, even though he's missed a majority of the season so far, I'm going to go ahead and toss him out because he looked good last week, and more than likely they'll ramp up the workload a little bit more for him this week. Who knows? Maybe this is the week that the Giants finally turn it around. Probably not. But for the wide receivers, there's only one person I'm going to start this week. I'll roll with Slayton going up against a Dallas defense that got absolutely burnt by the wide receivers, especially OBJ last week going up against Cleveland. Now, some of OBJ's points come from that long run that he had, but still had a big day through the air as well. So Darius Slayton is a guy that I think can definitely have a good week this week. But I'm going to sit the rest of them. And Golden Tate at this point, we haven't heard whether or not he's suspended. I'm going to list him as a sit, but he might not even find the field this week. And if that happens, Darius Slayton's really the only true wide receiver on that team that could see a lot of volume. For the Cowboys, we are going to start all three of these guys, okay? We're going to roll with all three of them this week because why? I think Dallas is going to have to throw the ball just like they have every single game this year. So I'll roll with all three of these guys as starts this week, going up against a defense that really isn't quite as good as some of the other defenses that they've seen this year, even though they can continue to tear them up. I think this is a defense that could allow a lot more involvement from all three of these guys. And I think maybe Mike McCarthy looks at it this week and says, man, we got to get Michael Gallup a little bit more involved, so they go his route as well. But Amari Cooper, definitely a start for me. CeeDee Lamb has been too good and too consistent for us with the volume. Michael Gallup's a little bit more boom or bust, so just keep in mind, if you try to use him this week, you could get 25 points, you could get 5 points. Indianapolis and Cleveland, and I'm going to roll with T.Y. Hilton as a start again this week. He's going to be a low-end start for me, though, a guy back towards the 30 range. And Zach Pascal is also going to be a start for me as well. They ended up combining for 13 targets last week. But I can't imagine that they're going to go into Cleveland and not try to throw the football on them a little bit, especially after watching what Dallas did to them last week. Phillip Rivers is going to have to step his game up a little bit. He's not going down the field very well right now. He's got to get going with that a little bit more. We'll see maybe if a matchup against Cleveland can help with that. A Cleveland team that, again, got shredded by Dallas last week. So maybe Indianapolis says, yep, we got to try and do a little bit of the same thing and keep the pressure on them. With that being said, we're going to go back to Landry and OBJ both as starts. I remember a time when people said OBJ was overrated. He's not overrated, ladies and gentlemen. He's really, really good. It just took the right offensive system here to really get them flowing, and this is a team that is flowing on all cylinders right now. And no more Nick Chubb. We'll see if they run the ball as much as they have been over the first few weeks of the season. I definitely expect Kareem Hunt to see a huge workload this week, but maybe they do throw the ball around a little bit more than what they have been. For the Denver wide receivers, headed into New England with a quarterback that I just don't know if I can trust that well in New England, I'm going to sit all of them. Tim Patrick and Jerry Jeudy both coming off really good games against the New York Jets. It's a little bit different. This is a tough pass defense for the New England Patriots still, so maybe the Denver Broncos focus on running it a little bit more this week. That might be the key to success in New England. I don't know if they're going to be able to throw it the way they did last week against the Jets. So go ahead and skip on these guys this week. For New England, we'll continue to roll with Julian Edelman. Really is the only guy that is worth a start right now. Now, I will say this about Bird. He's a sit for me, but he did see 10 targets last week. So if we see this week maybe that he picks up the pace a little bit, maybe when Cam Newton comes back, and he's been seeing some of that volume, maybe Cam Newton starts to look his way a little bit more as well. Minnesota at Seattle is going to contain not one, but two Manscaped must-starts for me this week in Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. We got to get these guys in our lineups this week, going up against a Seattle defense that has allowed 15 more fantasy points per game than any other team this season. They have allowed the most fantasy points per game. The closest team is 15 points behind them. Whew, that's a whole lot of points, ladies and gentlemen. And this is an offense, since Justin Jefferson's been going, they've been looking a lot better, and so is Kirk Cousins. So both of these guys are in a prime position to smash this week. And don't forget, if you head to manscaped.com, you can use code word headliners, and you can get 20% off any of their great items there at manscaped.com. Code word headliners. For the Seattle Seahawks, you do not sit DK Metcalf, and you don't sit Tyler Lockett. I know Tyler Lockett left a lot of you down last week and didn't really have that great of a game, coming off a huge game the week before. But keep in mind, in previous seasons, Tyler Lockett has had some of these weeks where, yeah, he'll go out and smash one week, and the next week it's a little bit more of a down week, but expect him to get back into it this week. They're throwing the ball an awful lot. Russell Wilson's on his game. This passing game is firing on all cylinders right now, so continue to run him out there on a weekly basis. For the Chargers and the Saints on Monday Night Football, Keenan Allen, he's a must-start for us every single week. The dude continues to get a ton of volume and continues to look great. One of the more underappreciated weapons in all of football by the football community. If you don't get a chance to watch Allen play, you really got to look up some of his tape. The dude is so good and doesn't get nearly enough love for it. As far as the deep ball goes, Mike Williams was out last week, so Jalen Guyton stepped in and had himself a big day. Yeah, it was only one catch, but it was one catch for over 70 yards and a touchdown. If Mike Williams plays this week, then we're not going to consider Guyton, but I've got a feeling that Williams could be out for a second consecutive week, and if he is, Jalen Guyton's actually going to be a start for me. Now, if Williams does end up playing, we're going to sit Guyton, but as of right now, no Williams equals Guyton, because I think we could see a big play. And plus, Austin Eckler being out for a while now could help ship some of those targets over to another wide receiver. So I don't mind Guyton this week as like a low-end flex play for those of you that are really hurting and might need some upside. Just keep in mind Mike Williams. If he's back, we're going to skip over it. Now, for the New Orleans Saints. If Michael Thomas is healthy and plays, you play Michael Thomas. If Michael Thomas is out and doesn't play, then you play Emmanuel Sanders. If Michael Thomas is hurt or in, it doesn't matter, you play Traquan Smith. That's right. Traquan Smith is going to be a start for me this week no matter what. 2 touchdowns last week, really looking like he is stepping into a bigger role for the Saints, and I hope that continues because he deserves it. He has enough talent to do it. He's just had too many weapons around him to really break out and have that type of a season. Maybe he's headed that way this year. Hopefully it continues for him. He's a start for me along with Michael Thomas this week. But again, if Michael Thomas doesn't play, then Emmanuel Sanders, who's a sit for me right now, will become a start. There you have it, Headliner Nation. My week 5 wide receiver start and sits. Hopefully you got a great bunch of information there that you can use to set your fantasy lineups this week. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, become a part of Headliner Nation today if you haven't done so yet. Use the comments down below and let me know if you've got any questions on wide receivers. I'll try to get to as many as I can. And as always, hit that like button if you appreciate the information that we're pumping out for you. Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully y'all are staying safe, staying healthy. And Headliner Nation, I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.